Ex-fiancé left me after 7 years for a younger, more successful version of me at work, and it's a devastating reality. I was with my ex-fiancé for 7 years. He is the only romantic partner I've ever truly loved. I was completely, head over heels in love with him. I've currently locked myself in a conference room and shut the blinds so no one can see me cry as I type this. Even now, after all this, I still feel that way about him. He is charming, goofy, kind, quick-witted, interesting, ambitious, and gorgeous. We got engaged 2 years ago, but we're not in a rush to get married. About a year ago, we began to seriously contemplate trying for a baby. We had lived together happily for 6 years, we had done all the traveling and partying we wanted to in our 20s, and we were excited to start our family. Over the next 6 months, he was much busier than normal, but I didn't think anything was wrong. I did my best to alleviate any extra stress he had, though I was experiencing some extra pressure at work too, by taking over all the housework and errands, helping him organize and pack for trips, and just being understanding when he would work very late or need to leave for a week or two. We didn't spend as much time together during that period and I missed him a lot, but I thought we were still happy. When the 6 months were over, our schedules reverted back to normal. I felt relieved until I started to notice him becoming more distant despite the fact that we finally had more time together. He started going on his phone more frequently when we were together and seemed to be more protective of his phone. I'm not generally a jealous person and I trusted him completely, so I didn't think much of it. Then one day, after another month had passed, I brought up the topic of trying for a baby as we discussed. I could immediately tell something was wrong. He was quiet for a while and then he unleashed a flood. He said he was unhappy with our relationship and had been for some time. He said that he cared about me deeply but that the spark in our relationship had died and that he tried to convince himself he could live without that spark but had ultimately decided that he couldn't. He said I had done nothing wrong and in fact was the perfect partner, but that didn't change the fact that he couldn't shake this nagging feeling that I wasn't the one for him. He said that he didn't want to hurt me but that he couldn't condemn himself to a lifetime of settling for someone that wasn't his dream girl, even though he didn't know if his dream girl existed. He said he was sorry but he couldn't live a lie anymore. I don't think I said a single word as he was telling me all this because I just felt so utterly shocked and blindsided. I just stood there, staring and listening, and crying silently. When he finished, all I could utter was something like, "Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know, do you still love me?" He paused for a while and then said that he loved me but wasn't in love with me anymore. We proceeded to spend the whole night discussing his feelings and our relationship, until we were both so exhausted we couldn't cry anymore and the sun was coming up. He said he was sorry again, and it was probably best if he stayed at a friend's place, so he packed up some stuff and left. That was about 5 months ago. We never really talked in person again. His brother and his best friend came over that weekend to get the rest of his stuff and I just left while they were packing because I couldn't stand to be there. I felt so shocked and numb and traumatized and tired that I didn't even cry much. I couldn't really process what was happening as I went through the motions of moving out and explaining the situation to my family. When I finally moved into my new place and sat alone with my boxes, I completely broke down. I could not stop crying and dry heaving. I ended up using 5 vacation days to take off a week of work, which really irked my manager. I could not get out of bed. I barely ate, living off this old tub of peanut butter. I looked through all our old pictures and tried to figure out where it all went wrong. Then for 4 months, I tried my best to move on. I deleted all my social media apps so I wouldn't have to see him. I dove into work. I ramped up my hobbies. I exercised to keep my mind occupied. I met with friends and family and pretended everything was okay. I started going to my therapist again, which helped a bit. I finally thought I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. Then a month ago, I ran into a mutual friend from college. She said it was really sad to see we weren't together anymore, and surprising to see he'd moved on so fast. I told her I wasn't keeping up with him anymore but that I was doing okay. When I got home, even though I knew it was a terrible idea, I re-downloaded Instagram and went to his profile. His latest picture was him at his cousin's wedding with his arm around a gorgeous girl. All the old pictures of him and I were gone from his profile. Again, I knew it was a terrible, self-destructive idea. But I went to the girl's profile and Googled her. She is literally a younger, smarter, prettier, and better version of myself. We both studied at the same university but she completed a prestigious program which I was rejected from. We both have green eyes and brown hair but she is far prettier and legitimately looks like a model. We are both thin and fit but she has an amazing hourglass figure and looks far more stylish than me and has tens of thousands of followers even though she's not an influencer or whatnot. In fact, we both work at the same company. I'm pretty sure my ex met her through work, but she landed a job in a prestigious division right out of undergrad and likely makes more money than me. She is an improved version of me, 7 years younger. And the love of my life is dating her. For the past month, I've been spiraling. I can't stop stalking my ex-fiancé and this girl. I look at her Instagram every day and torture myself with her gorgeous pictures. She's posted a dozen pictures with my ex over the past few months and he looks so happy, healthy, and fit. They've gone on trips together, he's brought her to his hometown, and he's even posted a picture of them with a mushy caption which he never did when we were together. I have no evidence and I don't think my ex would do this but I now suspect he was at least interested in her while we were still together. She started at the company about a year ago. I'm so paranoid of running into them. I can recognize that my behavior is obsessive and masochistic, and I've deleted Instagram and told myself I'm not going to do this anymore, only to wake up the next day and re-download the app and do it again. My therapist has been trying to help, but I just cannot move past this. I'm stuck in this mental loop of self-loathing and self-pity, this crazy mix of extreme sadness and latent anger. I feel so incredibly low. Worthless, used up, discarded, and suddenly, so incredibly old. I know that comparison is the thief of joy. I know that I am objectively still young enough to move on. I know that social media is a highlight reel and their relationship may not be perfect. I know that this girl has done nothing wrong to me. I know that my ex deserves to find his dream girl. But none of this knowledge helps soften the fact that I thought that by this time this year, I would be pregnant with the love of my life, and instead, I'm alone and he's found someone better. Update 1. Hi again, guys. It's been about 3 months since I posted about my struggle to move past my 7-year relationship with my ex-fiancé. While I cringe when I think about the pathetic state I was in when I wrote that post, sobbing alone in that conference room, I was stunned by the empathetic, mature, and helpful advice I received from members of this subreddit. These past few months have been an absolute rollercoaster, and I thought I owed this subreddit an update given how much solace and guidance you guys gave me during some of my darkest days. I don't think things would have worked out nearly as well if I had continued to bottle up those festering emotions and isolate myself, so I'm grateful for every single person who commented and messaged me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, here's what happened. The night I made that post, I finally blocked my ex-fiancé and his girlfriend on Instagram, as many of you suggested. I think actually verbalizing how obsessive and masochistic my behavior was, instead of keeping it all inside, and finally feeling validated in my emotional reactions after reading your sympathetic comments, instead of feeling alone and crazy, clicked something in my brain. I resolved to break out of that self-destructive loop, to stop torturing myself with their perfect pictures and reclaim a modicum of self-respect. It was an incredible relief to not be constantly following the impulse to view their new pictures and give myself some time to heal instead of picking at that scab every single day. That weekend, I decided to reconnect with my family and friends and stop pretending that I was handling the breakup flawlessly. They were incredibly compassionate, though also shocked that I had been hiding my dark feelings so well, and it was like I'd instantly rebuilt my support network. I didn't realize how emotionally isolated I had become until I was able to be honest and open with people in my life. I did continue to avoid talking to friends who were mutual friends with my ex because I didn't want to put anyone in an awkward position, but I was able to reconnect with a few of my other friends, and I took the initiative to finally make some fun plans. Getting out of the house to enjoy brunches, hikes, and shows with my friends over the past few months has been incredibly beneficial for my mental health. Just being in new environments and focusing on people other than my ex was therapeutic, even for someone who tends towards introversion like myself. For your suggestions, I also decided to try out another therapist. I did find my original therapist somewhat helpful, but I also felt like he was not able to relate to some of the nuances in my issues given that he was in his late 50s, so we had a bit of a generational gap. My new therapist is incredibly compatible with me, and instantly understood the intricacies of my problems. She has helped considerably with addressing the roots of my insecurities and was able to validate and analyze my feelings in a much more intimate way. If you are struggling to find therapy useful, I highly recommend shopping around a bit for a more compatible therapist. Therapy is certainly not one size fits all. Another popular suggestion from you guys was finding a job at another company, away from my ex-fiancé and his girlfriend. I didn't think that would be possible since the job market in my field is not great at the moment, but I began actively searching for other positions. I brushed up my resume, filled out a couple applications, and even surprisingly secured an interview. Then out of the blue, someone above me in my division quit to join a competitor. The senior managers were quite eager to fill his role quickly, so they decided to go with an internal hire. And after 5 or 6 rounds of interviews, God, I absolutely dread interviews, I got the job. I'm so grateful for this promotion. Not only is the salary substantially better, but the hours are actually more consistent as well. It's crazy, I feel like the momentum of my life has shifted so quickly. And I finally have an office. It's tiny, but I really enjoy it. The only downside was this promotion also meant I would have to continue working in the same building, albeit a very large building, as my ex. And as I left work before Christmas, the moment I'd been dreading came. I ran into my ex as I was leaving the office. We exchanged a few pleasantries and he complimented my new haircut. I thanked him, wished him well, and said I had to hurry to catch the next train. I wish I could say I felt cool and collected, but I was so nervous to see him again for the first time in like 6 months that I was almost shaking. On the commute home, I calmed down and actually thought, hey, that wasn't so bad. He looked good, but I didn't feel a rush of sadness or desire or anything. I mostly just felt awkward, like we'd become strangers again. I didn't feel that familiar impulse to stalk his Instagram and actually felt happy to see he was doing okay since I'd cared for him for so many years. I felt like at last, I was really moving forward. The next day, I woke up to a dozen messages from my ex-fiancé. They started at around 2 a.m. and were slightly incoherent in parts, so I'm guessing he was a bit drunk when he sent them. They were all long walls of text, which surprised me because he's not typically big on verbalizing his emotions. He wrote that he hadn't been able to stop thinking about me since we ran into each other outside the office, that he was sad that we weren't friends anymore because I still felt like his best friend, and that he regretted how everything went down. He said he questioned if he'd made a huge mistake in a moment of weakness and fucked his whole life up, and that he couldn't help but regret it all when he saw me. He apparently noticed that I'd blocked him on Instagram, which I found funny given how intensely I'd been stalking his Instagram, and said that made him really sad. I gathered from his messages that he'd likely broken up with the woman I'd seen on his Instagram because he said that he felt like he had been searching for some ideal woman who doesn't exist, and that he wanted to reignite our spark after failing to find that same spark with other people. I'm not going to lie, it was shocking to read his texts, and I was trembling and struggling to process a lot of it at first. Part of me wanted impulsively to give him another chance, but after taking a day to mull over his words, I ended up feeling like he was less sorry that he'd lost our relationship and more sorry that the greener pastures he sought weren't quite as green as he'd imagined. I tried to respond kindly but firmly, saying that I really treasured and appreciated our relationship, but that I felt like I could no longer trust him to the same degree I once did, and that I felt like it would be confusing and painful for us to become friends in the near future. I told him how hurt I felt when he blindsided me after promising that nothing was wrong, and how I struggled for a long time to figure out what was missing in our relationship, but ultimately felt that as long as he thought the missing part was so crucial that he wanted to leave after all those years together, then we probably aren't meant to be together. I wished him the best. He didn't respond to my messages. I was a bit shaken by the whole thing, but I proceeded to enjoy my holiday break with my family and even elected to go to my friend's New Year's Eve party, which I was considering skipping. Well, I'm super glad I didn't skip the party because I ended up meeting a wonderful man there. He's funny, intelligent, cute, interesting, compassionate, and is eager to settle down and have kids after also somewhat recently exiting a long-term relationship. We've gone on 3 dates so far, and at the risk of sounding too enthusiastic, they've been the best dates of my life. We want to take it slow since we were both in long-term relationships a year ago, but we've been stunned by how compatible our personalities and interests and goals are, and frankly, we're also both quite keen to start a family as soon as possible. Update 2. My relationship with Jake, the wonderful man I met at the New Year's Eve party, has blossomed beyond what I could have imagined. After those first few amazing dates, we continued seeing each other regularly, both conscious of our recent breakups but drawn to the natural ease between us. By spring, we were officially a couple, and I found myself experiencing a kind of partnership that felt both familiar and refreshingly new. Jake moved in with me 3 months ago, which was a big step for both of us. We had many serious conversations about it beforehand, discussing our fears and expectations. Unlike my previous relationship, where I often kept worries to myself, Jake and I have established a foundation of radical honesty. When something bothers either of us, we address it immediately rather than letting it fester. The most significant development came last month when I discovered I was pregnant. We hadn't been actively trying, but we weren't being particularly careful either. When I saw those 2 lines on the test, I experienced a whirlwind of emotions: excitement, terror, joy, and a strange sense of vindication. This wasn't the life I had imagined a year ago, but somehow it felt right in a way I couldn't have anticipated. Jake was overjoyed at the news. He immediately started researching everything from prenatal vitamins to college savings plans. He's adorably thorough. We've already started converting my home office into a nursery, though I'm only 10 weeks along. My doctor says everything looks healthy so far. Work and complications, my promotion continues to challenge and fulfill me professionally. I've built a small but effective team, and my manager recently hinted at another advancement opportunity next year. The consistent hours have been a blessing, especially now with the pregnancy. However, working in the same building as my ex-fiancé has proven more complicated than I expected. After his drunk texts and my firm response, he maintained radio silence for months. Then, about 2 months ago, I learned through office gossip that he had gotten back together with the younger woman I had been so obsessed with. I was surprised by my own reaction, a brief twinge of something, not quite jealousy, more like nostalgia, followed by genuine indifference. Last week, we ended up in the same elevator. He was alone, looking tired and somewhat disheveled. He congratulated me on my pregnancy. News travels fast in our company, and I thanked him politely. Then came the bombshell. He told me his girlfriend was also pregnant, due just a month before me. He seemed to be searching my face for a reaction, but all I felt was a strange sense of symmetry. We're both moving forward on parallel paths, just with different people. I'm happy for you, I told him, and meant it. When the elevator doors opened, I walked away feeling lighter than I had in years. My therapist has been instrumental in helping me process these developments. Recently, we've been exploring why I was so devastated by my ex choosing someone who seemed like a better version of me. Through our sessions, I've come to understand that I had tied my self-worth to his validation for so long that his rejection felt like an objective assessment of my value. Jake loves me for qualities my ex never particularly appreciated: my dry humor, my analytical mind, my passion for obscure documentaries. It's not that Jake is better than my ex, just fundamentally different in what he values. This realization has been healing in ways I didn't expect. I still have moments of insecurity, especially now with my body changing. But they're fleeting rather than consuming. I'm learning to recognize these thoughts as visitors rather than permanent residents in my mind. As I approach motherhood, I feel a sense of purpose and contentment that was missing even in the happiest days of my previous relationship. Jake and I have discussed marriage, but we're in no rush. We want to focus on our baby first and perhaps have a small ceremony after the birth. My family is thrilled about the baby, especially my mother, who has already knitted enough tiny hats and booties to clothe a small army of infants. Jake's parents were initially concerned about our relatively new relationship but have warmed to the idea after seeing us together. Update 3. Jake and I welcomed our beautiful daughter, Lily, into the world just 2 months ago. The birth was challenging, 24 hours of labor followed by an emergency C-section, but the moment they placed her on my chest, I felt a love so profound it made everything else fade away. Jake was my rock throughout the entire process, staying by my side, advocating for me when I was too exhausted to speak, and crying unabashedly when he first held our daughter. Motherhood has been both more difficult and more rewarding than I could have imagined. The sleep deprivation is real, but watching Jake sing silly made-up songs to get Lily to stop crying at 3 a.m. makes my heart swell in ways I never thought possible. We're figuring it out together, day by day, mistake by mistake, triumph by triumph. My return to work after maternity leave has been gradual but positive. My company has been surprisingly accommodating, allowing me to work from home 3 days a week. My team stepped up tremendously during my absence, and I've found that motherhood has actually made me more efficient. When you only have limited hours to work, you learn to prioritize quickly. The most unexpected development came last month when I was approached about heading a new division that's being created. It would mean more responsibility but also more flexibility in my schedule. I'm still considering the offer, weighing the professional opportunity against the time with my family. Jake has been incredibly supportive, reminding me that whatever I choose, we'll make it work together. As for my ex-fiancé, our paths have diverged completely. I heard through office gossip that he and his girlfriend, now wife, moved to another state for her career advancement. When I heard the news, I realized I felt nothing but a vague sense of well-wishing. That chapter of my life feels like it happened to someone else, a person I used to be but no longer recognize. My therapist says that becoming a mother has helped me find a new center of gravity. Where I once defined myself largely through my relationships and professional achievements, I now have a more grounded sense of self. The insecurities that once consumed me, comparing myself to others, feeling not enough, have receded significantly. That's not to say I don't have moments of doubt. Just last week, I found myself scrolling through Instagram, looking at mothers who seem to have it all together, spotless homes, thriving careers, and babies who apparently never cry. I mentioned this to Jake, who laughed and gestured around our living room, which was strewn with burp cloths, unfolded laundry, and half-finished cups of coffee. "This is real life," he said. "And it's beautiful." He was right. The chaos is part of the journey, and I'm learning to embrace it rather than fight against it. Jake and I have started discussing marriage more seriously. We're thinking of a small ceremony in the fall, just close family and friends. Nothing elaborate, we'd rather put the money toward a house with a yard where Lily can play. My mother has practically moved in with us, coming over 3 times a week to help with the baby. She and Jake have developed their own special relationship, bonding over their shared love of obscure documentaries and terrible puns. Watching them together, I sometimes think about how differently things could have turned out, and I feel overwhelmingly grateful for this unexpected path. As March unfolds, I find myself looking forward to the small joys. Lily's first real smile, not just gas, weekend walks in the park as spring arrives, and the gradual return to some semblance of normalcy. There will be challenges ahead, certainly, but I'm facing them with a confidence I never had before. Update 4. Lily just celebrated her first birthday last month. The party was small, just family and a few close friends, but perfect in every way. Jake spent weeks planning it, insisting on baking the cake himself, which turned out surprisingly well for someone who once managed to burn microwave popcorn. Watching Lily smash her tiny hands into that cake, her face lighting up with pure joy, I felt a happiness so complete it almost hurt. Motherhood continues to be the most challenging and rewarding experience of my life. Lily is walking now, or rather, running and occasionally face planting, and developing quite the personality. She's stubborn like her father and analytical like me, studying everything with those serious green eyes before breaking into the most infectious giggle. Jake and I finally got married in October, just as we'd planned. It was a simple ceremony in my parents' backyard, with autumn leaves creating a natural carpet of red and gold. We wrote our own vows, and I surprised myself by not crying through mine, though Jake definitely teared up during his. My mother, who has become Lily's most devoted fan, insisted on handling all the decorations and somehow transformed the space into something magical with just fairy lights and wildflowers. Our honeymoon was a weekend at a cabin by the lake, not exactly exotic, but with a 1-year-old, we were grateful for any time alone together. My mother was thrilled to have Lily all to herself for the weekend and sent us approximately 50 photos per day. I decided to accept the offer to head the new division at work, and while the learning curve has been steep, it's been incredibly fulfilling. My team is small but dedicated, and we've already exceeded our first quarter goals. The flexibility to work from home part of the week has been crucial in balancing work and family life. Jake recently received a promotion as well, which came with better hours. We've established a good rhythm now. He takes the early morning shift with Lily so I can get ready for work in peace, and I handle the bedtime routine most nights. It's not always perfect, and we've had our share of exhausted arguments over whose turn it is to do the dishes, but we're figuring it out together. My therapy sessions have become less frequent, monthly rather than weekly, but they remain an important part of my self-care routine. My therapist and I have been working on what she calls future-focused thinking rather than dwelling on past comparisons or regrets. Last week, I had a moment of clarity while watching Jake and Lily during their morning routine. As they danced around the kitchen to some silly song Jake made up, I realized I hadn't thought about my ex-fiancé in months. Not in anger, not in sadness, not in comparison. He simply hadn't crossed my mind. When I mentioned this to my therapist, she smiled and said, "That's not forgetting. That's healing." I've also been embracing new beginnings in other areas of my life. I joined a book club that meets monthly at a local cafe, started taking a pottery class on Saturday mornings. My creations are hilariously lopsided, but I find the process meditative, and have been learning to cook more complex meals with varying degrees of success. Ake and I have started house hunting, looking for a place with a yard for Lily and maybe room for another child in the future. We're not in a rush to expand our family just yet. We want to enjoy this time with Lily, but we've been discussing the possibility of trying for another baby next year. The climate change reports have been concerning lately, especially regarding maternal and child health impacts. I find myself thinking more about the world Lily will grow up in, which has motivated me to make more environmentally conscious choices in our daily life. It's a small contribution, but it feels important. As March unfolds, I'm looking forward to Lily's first real experience of spring. Introducing her to flowers, taking her to the park as the weather warms, watching her discover the world anew each day. There's something profoundly healing about experiencing familiar things through a child's eyes. Sometimes, in quiet moments like this one, I still marvel at how differently my life turned out from what I had planned. That woman crying in the conference room couldn't have imagined this path, this particular joy, this specific love, this exact life that now feels so perfectly mine. Not better or worse than what might have been, just beautifully, uniquely different.